Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. It's the 19th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest weather in your community. There's lots of ways to do that by heading to weather.gov or weather.gov/Alaska. If you like to look at the entire statewide view, you can also do that with your favorite website at arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line is always open at 800-472-0391. You can access weather information via Twitter. Each National Weather Service office in Alaska has access to that at NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, and NWS Juneau. Find us on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska. If you'd been there today, you would have seen snowfall reports around south central Alaska and a look at the latest sea ice edge from our sea ice program. And of course, you can find an afternoon briefing on YouTube from the National Weather Service Anchorage account, NWS Anchorage, if you search it that way. Or if you wait till after the show a little bit in the evening and maybe you missed a part of that you really wanted to see, or you came in late and missed the entire thing, no worry. You go to alaskapublic.org. You'll get the daily broadcast there in its entirety. On the right side of your screen, there's a video player there. Or just go to YouTube and search for AKWX TV, and you'll find the complete broadcast in that way as well. Here's a look at what's going on. We have no watches or warnings anywhere apart on the mainland of Alaska or in southeast at this point. So things quieting down, at least as far as hazardous weather goes in those areas, but it's ramping up in the west. And this is where a lot of the activity over the next probably 3, 4, 5 days is going to be across the western parts of Alaska, maybe into the Bering Strait communities, and certainly along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, where the focus for more active weather will be, and perhaps in the southeast as we go. In the meantime, blizzard warning is in effect now for St. Paul and St. George Island, the Pribilofs there. That'll go until 4 o'clock on Thursday. 2 to 4 inches of snow is expected in that area between now and then, and stronger winds, of course. That makes that blizzard component work. 30 to 40 mile an hour winds there, I believe, from the north and east, gusting up to 50 miles per hour. And out across the extreme western Aleutians, a winter weather advisory there. We're watching for 2 to 4 inches of snow, also with a half-mile visibility, northeasterly winds, perhaps gusting up to 55 miles per hour. So a lot of winds going to be racing across the Bering and the Aleutians, and snow is still going to be falling in some of these areas. So watch for some changing weather there in the next 24 hours. That winter weather advisory continues until, I believe, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, so plan for some changes. Looking out across the west with the Bering Sea satellite picture and a look at the North Pacific, you can see a large area of circulating weather here. That's the low pressure system working its way up into the central Bering Sea. Out ahead of that, plenty of moisture, and that will be working its way into south and western Alaska in a matter of time. Northerly winds still coming down the west coast of Alaska. So for now, that ice edge has been advancing, but it's probably going to put on the brakes here as we get into probably Thursday afternoon and into Friday with more of an easterly flow developing there. So right now, as of the latest analysis today, which we'll share with you in just a little bit, those ice strips are within about 50 nautical miles now of St. Paul. And again, we'll have a look at the image there, or you can cheat and go over to Facebook right now. Here's a look at the rest of Alaska. Things were quieting down across northern parts of southeast today. Across the southern parts of southeast, still getting a little bit of snow and kind of some convective snow in that area, I believe, mainly south of Sitka and Port Alexander. and the Frederick Sound area, we're seeing some snow showers, but northerly areas we're clearing up, so a little bit of a nicer day perhaps in that region. Cloud cover was sparse across the interior. Watch for some fog in the coming days there as high pressure tries to settle in response to low pressure developing and strengthening out across the southern Bering Sea and the North Pacific. We had a little bit of a convective snow move over south central yesterday. If you're in the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, or maybe as far north as Palmer and Wasilla, you probably saw at least a little bit of that. Some places around Alyeska and the Girdwood area probably did the best, on the order of about 10 to 16 inches of snow, I believe, at least. In some cases, probably more up in the hills, of course. And around Prince William Sound, saw at least a little bit of snow around Seward. Some cases there 4 to 6. And around Fairbanks today, we saw a little bit of a cloud cover working over your region. You can see that on the infrared satellite picture here. A lot of it just kind of grazing the area as the circulation moves its way back into the YK Delta. Winds seem to be settling down across a large part of the region for the YK Delta and the actual YK rivers themselves. The wind didn't seem to be as much of an issue, but the cold was certainly socking into the north slope there. Dead Horse this morning started out at 49 below, so that is cold spot honors for you today. Not that you probably wanted that. Haines today, on the other hand, just to give you an idea of how big the temperatures were spread across the region with a clear sky, made it up to 39 degrees. Low pressure late this afternoon was still sitting across the North Pacific and the northern Gulf at that, 997 millibars there. A lot of dry air across the Gulf, and you can see the low stratus there stretching across the Bering. Some clearing here just off the Kuskokwim Bay region and into Norton Sound. And here's our newest friend, 988 millibar low there with warm front moving up and north of the Aleutians. And with that comes a stronger southerly flow that's going to be working its way all the way up the west coast. So by the weekend, precipitation that's falling across the south and west, Norton Sound, maybe into the Bering Strait and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. It might not all be snow. It's going to be that kind of warm coming its way northward again as a ridge begins to build in. You'll see the beginnings of that when we look at the aviation charts in a minute. Low pressure draped across the North Gulf with a trough there all the way from, well, the Susitna Valley, across Prince William Sound and into northern parts of southeast. Probably keep a pretty tight focus for rain and snow showers across parts of southeast and Prince William Sound. Anything we see around the region tonight will probably be mostly confined to Prince William Sound. Don't be surprised to see a stray shower develop across south central, but most of that again should be on the eastern side. Looking at across the Bering, there's a double barrel low working its way northward slowly. Remember, it's really fighting that cold air as it's trying to lift northward, but it has a lot of power and support from the upper atmosphere in doing so. So snow and blowing snow likely with a blizzard warning now in the Pribilofs, again going until 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and a winter weather advisory for the extreme western Aleutians that'll go until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Both areas looking at accumulating snow in the beginning. Thursday's forecast shows that system working its way northward, bringing a better chance for snow showers into the Alaska Peninsula, grazing south and western Alaska with snow showers there, and the same goes for the north and eastern coast. We're going to really limit the amount of precipitation I think we'll see around southeast, probably a better chance in southern parts of the Panhandle than anywhere else. Northern areas probably looking at least a mostly to partly sunny kind of day. As you get into the interior, look at the wealth of clear, dry sky across your region for Thursday. Really looks like a fairly nice day by comparison to recent ones. Areas of fog still possible across the mid-interior, but by and large, a lot of that will probably clear up during the day. As we get into Friday, high pressure is trying to really establish itself across the northern parts of the Yukon at 1,037 millibars, and that is all in response to this big organization of low pressure across the southern Bering and North Pacific. You can see the warmth stretching up from the Gulf. You can see the stronger southerly flow developing across the Alaska Peninsula here, the YK Delta all the way up past Hooper Bay and almost into Norton Sound. That means the winds are picking up in this region too, probably out toward, even Nome, looking at increasing winds. Some areas of fog across the Yukon with high pressure still trying to hold on to some of that lower terrain. Some areas of cloud cover across the Brooks Range. The north slope, though, looks to be relatively clear. And you can see the wraparound, the colder air working its way back across the western Aleutians. So we're going to watch this as this goes into Saturday and Sunday, but what this probably means is changing precipitation types again for the west coast, maybe up toward Nome as we get into Saturday, and probably some stronger winds across the YK, the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and even Kodiak. They're looking at a chance for rain and snow as we get into Friday. Looks like a lot of that will hold out of south central initially for Friday afternoon. We'll have to see what happens for the weekend. And spotty areas of rain and snow perhaps across the coastal areas of southeast, maybe into the southern entrance region there. So let's look at the next couple days. Let's look at what happened today. Low to mid 30s across a good part of southeast. The Yukon and Whitehorse looking at temps around 9. 20s and 30s for Prince William Sound and South Central up and down the Cook Inlet. Talkeetna was 23. Up around Healy and Greeley, temperatures were holding closer to the single digits, just shy of 10. Fairbanks 4 below, about the same there in Tanana. Up around Nenana, temperatures were a little bit cooler still. Fort Yukon looked at 11 below late this afternoon, 18 below in Arctic Village, nearly 25 below in Anaktuvuk Pass. And there's our friends on the North Slope, really keeping those temps down around Dead Horse and Prudhoe Bay today. Again, Dead Horse started at 49 below, only made it up to 42 below. Kaktovik was 29 below. Negative 33 for Barrow. Kotzebue Sound temperatures ranged anywhere from 0 in Shishmaref to about 17 below. Out as you get out around Kivalina and Point South. 7 above in Nome, the YK Delta, mainly in the, close to 0, let's say. Nunivak Island was 7. 1 above in Savunga and 1 below in McGrath as you head up the river a little bit. Out toward Bethel, it was 5 above. Bristol Bay temperatures in the single digits, low to mid-teens for areas around the Port Hayden and Port Muller. And out around Sand Point, False Pass, Cold Bay, upper 20s there. 28 around Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, 19 in St. George, 37 in Adak, and 26 in Shemya. Overnight low temperatures then anywhere from, 30 below to 45 to even 50 below across the Arctic coast. Southwest anywhere from 0 to 10 below. Bethel looking at 11 below, about the same there in Nome, the YK Delta and Alaska Peninsula. Generally pretty big difference there in temperatures thanks to that southerly flow developing. So the Alaska Peninsula, we're looking at teens and 20s, 31 around Unalaska Dutch Harbor, and about that for the central and western parts of the chain, 17 in St. Paul. Teens and 20s for most of southeast coastal areas, though, all the way down toward Ketchikan and Annette and up to Sitka, probably closer to 30 degrees. High temperatures tomorrow in south central, back in the low to mid 20s. Kodiak, you're looking at 30, the chain and most of the peninsula in the 30s and 40s. St. Paul and St. George in the upper 20s. Nunivak Island, you're expecting 3 degrees for a high. 4 in Nome. Galena, 5 below. Looks like Tanana and most of the Tanana Valley itself, anywhere from 5 to 10 below. Northway and Eagle straddling the 0 degree mark, but just barely there in Northway. 13 below as you head up toward Bettles. Ambler about 6 below. And anywhere from 15 to 40 below across the Arctic coast. Thankfully, those stronger winds have subsided. Flying weather, as you look at IFR conditions there south of Kodiak Island leading into the Alaska Peninsula with that southeasterly flow. We'll also have a patch of IFR, of course, over the Pribilofs and across the western parts of the chain. Thanks to that blowing and drifting snow southeast, you're looking at MVFR conditions mainly offshore, but your pass conditions for most of the interior should be okay. VFR, Adigan Pass, VFR for Anaktuvuk Pass as well. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, both expected to be VFR. Same goes for Rainy and Windy Pass tomorrow. Isabel Pass looks good. Mentasta Pass looks to be just fine at VFR conditions. And as we head into Thursday, Tanita Pass and Portage Pass also expected to be visual. Same goes for Chilkoot and White. It hasn't been this nice for this long in a while. The freezing levels then, you can notice that surface freezing line starting to edge northward as you would expect with more of a southerly flow and the storms coming up. Across the eastern Aleutians and southward, you can see a little bit of that elevated warming working its way northward, and that's about where it stops. That's as far north as it goes for right now. So icing potential, it's high up there, below 12,000 but above 3,000 feet across the southern Bering and the eastern parts of the chain and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And we're still got a little bit of ice potential there across the northern Gulf, all the way from northern parts of southeast to Prince William Sound and maybe into the Matanuska Valley there and also across the lower to mid Yukon Valley. Mainly light to isolated moderate rime. Jet stream potential, well, you can see the deep trough building out here just south and east of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Wind speeds on the south side of that, 180 to 185 knots. And now we've got our ridge beginning to build across the North Pacific. As we get into the weekend, this looks to work its way all the way up across the western parts of Alaska. In the meantime, that's going to allow that cold and dry air to drop southward quickly through the Yukon and back into the lower 48 states. 9,000 feet, you can see a little bit of a ridge taking shape here across the Gulf. Wind speeds coming in from the south and west to the Alaska Peninsula between 30 and about 40 knots. Some stronger winds there as you get out into the Aleutians from the south and west at 50 knots. Wind speeds are really light and pretty variable at this level across the interior. So if you're worried about wind speed and direction, it's going to be all over the place and it'll probably look different tomorrow as you get up and get moving. So keep that in mind there. But the good news is winds are relatively light. A westerly flow across the Arctic coast, 10 to 15 knots, and more of a northwesterly flow trying to work in, especially across northern parts of southeast. Look at 3,000 feet. I didn't even bother drawing arrows in here. The winds were so light, even didn't exist on the forecast models today. So anywhere from more of a southeasterly flow coming out of the Alaska range and across places like Grayling and Sparivon, more of a westerly flow coming across the Brooks Range, but only at 5 knots or so. Then you get into more of a sustained wind from the south and west across the eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula, around 35 to as high as 50 knots. And then a little bit of that ridge again across the Gulf, more of a westerly flow coming into southeast. And that dominant westerly flow continues across the Arctic coast with a ridge across eastern parts of Siberia. What about turbulence? It's going to focus in the west, and it should really focus here for the next several days. Below 4,000 feet across Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and then maybe some light chop across southeast, generally below 8,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. As promised, I'll have a look at the sea ice edge for you, and of course your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
The third W is the who field. Who was it, or what was it, that actually took this observation? So when we take a look at the METAR that we're working through, we take a look for the field that's officially known as the modifier field. But it tells us who took the observation, so we'll use who to remember it. In this particular case, the who was Otto. Now there's 3 things that can be done with that field. It can say Otto like it does here. It can say COR for corrected, or it can just be blank. A totally automated observation with no human intervention will include the word Otto here coming right after the time. Only reports with Otto up here in the modifier field are totally automated. Now when it says Otto there, it will also, down in the remarks section, tell you the type of automated facility that took that observation, AO1 or AO2. AO2 in this particular case. Now suppose the observation is a corrected observation. If it's been corrected, the indicator will say COR for corrected, added after the time there. You don't know what's been corrected. All you know is that something in here was corrected, and since it takes a human to correct an observation, you can be assured that someone has looked at that particular weather. Now sometimes this field will be completely missing. If the field is missing, like it is on this report, you can be assured that a real live person had something to do with the observation, or was at least signed on to the system. The observation may still have been taken, the basic information, by an automated system. The AO2 down here says so, but a human was involved because it does not say Otto up here at the beginning. Now, that human observer has added some information to this, which is very helpful to us. A human observer is able to add information about thunderstorms, information about the types of clouds that constitute the cloud layers, in this case CBs, and also some remarks down here, which we're going to look at later, about what kind of weather is occurring at that particular station. All automated reports will include either AO1 or AO2 in the remarks section to tell you what type of automated facility took it. If one of those is not there, you know that the observation is purely manual and not from an automated system at all. This observation had some human intervention, since there is no who or modifier up here in this field. The last of the 4 W's is wind, always an important consideration for an airplane. When we get to the METAR, we find that the wind information is clear and complete. It's transmitted as a 5 or a 6-digit group, in this case a 5-digit group. The first 3 digits of the group are always the direction from which the wind is blowing in relation to true north and given to the nearest 10 degrees. So here we have a wind blowing from 230 degrees true. Now the wind speed is reported in the next 2 or 3 digits. In this case 2 digits, the wind speed is 13 knots. 3 digits will be used for winds in excess of 99 knots. And I, for one, will certainly not be flying in that case. Now, at the end, KT has been added to remind us that all wind speeds are reported in knots. So what we have here is a wind from 230 degrees true with a wind speed of 13 knots. Now, sometimes the wind direction will be replaced by a three-letter group, VRB, standing for variable. And you know in that case, no rocket science required here, that the wind direction is variable. And that happens when the wind speed is 6 knots or less. So what we have in this case is variable at 5 knots. The wind direction is variable and the wind speed is 5 knots. Now, if the wind is variable over a 60-degree arc and the wind speed is above 6 knots, then the variable information will be reported as a separate group right after the wind group, like it is in this particular case. If you have a wind, like we do here, from 030 degrees true at a wind speed of 20 knots, but the wind direction is variable between 360 and 060, then you've got the variability shown here. It is variable between 360 degrees to 060 degrees. That puts the variability of the wind, which is very important information, right up there with the wind information where you see it immediately. Now, gusting winds are reported with a nice expanded format. For instance, in this particular case, we've got winds from 220 degrees true at a wind speed of 15 knots, gusting to 22 knots. The wind information is presented in an easy-to-interpret manner. Just as the letter Z makes it easy to locate the time of the observation, the units KT for knots makes locating the wind field a breeze.
More on that as we head into the next couple days. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and I've done a little something different here with the colors to perhaps help you out a little bit. This darker blue area that extends well into the Bering Strait and parts of Norton Sound all the way up towards St. Lawrence Island, that is mostly solid ice. Not entirely, of course, but this is the area of more solid ice than what we have here on the leading edge. This is strips, but that edge of the strips is within about 50 nautical miles or so from St. Paul, which is the interesting point in showing you that today. However, as we get into the next couple days, as the wind begins to shift around, of course, we've got warmer air also building northward, so a lot of things going to change with the sea ice edge. But as you look at Bristol Bay, out of Kuskokwim Bay, and the Pribilofs here, that easterly flow will slow that southward progression that we've been dealing with for the last couple days. And of course, we still have ice that's relatively solid there in strips across the Cook Inlet, all the way down past Kenai. So a lot of things going to be changing on the sea ice edge. You can always get the latest information there from our sea ice program at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, and then you can use the tools there to build maps like this as you please. Here's a look at southeast now. The wind's changing around over the next couple days. Northerly flow continues in the Lynn Canal. Relatively light winds across the central parts of the inner channels and northwesterly flow across the southern inner channels through Clarence and Chatham Strait. 20-knot flow there with a 4 to 7 foot sea. More of a west and northwesterly flow running down the coast and into the southern entrances between 20 and 30 knots. 8 to 14 foot seas on Thursday. By Friday, the winds reverse course, more of a south and easterly flow and offshore flow coming out of Yakutat and Icy Cape to Cape Fairweather. 15 to 20 knot winds there with 7 to 9 foot seas, and the inner channel is also responding to that southeasterly flow. 15 to 20 knot winds there, 3 to 4 foot seas through the entire area, but will hold on to that northerly flow across the north and southern parts of the Lynn Canal. In south central, a variable and light flow across the north and central parts of Cook Inlet. As you get into the Barren Islands, the winds are coming offshore, blowing anywhere from the west around 25 knots or so, more of a northwesterly flow off of the Harding ice field and out of Seward, 20 knots with a 6 foot sea. Northwesterlies also inside Prince William Sound, more of a westerly flow outside, and westerlies coming across Shelikof Strait. The only outlier there would be coming into Kodiak Island from the south and east, 25 knots with a 7 foot sea, and that becomes more broad spread and easterly across the north and western Gulf. Northeasterlies inside Prince William Sound, still light, and northerlies running down the Cook Inlet there, a 5 foot sea in the central parts of the Cook Inlet around 25 knots, and easterly flow coming moving across the Barren Islands at 30 knots and 35 knots inside Chillicothe Strait. And outside of Prince William Sound, about 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. Now, seas will be building and winds will be increasing as we head through Thursday. 20 to 30 knots there on around Bristol Bay and south of Kodiak Island out toward Chignik. 10-foot sea on the southern side of the peninsula, 35-knot winds there with a 12-foot sea coming in from the south and east, south of King Cove and Sand Point, and easterlies north of Cold Bay with a 40-knot wind with building seas there. On Friday, easterlies again opening up the water a little bit there across Bristol Bay, 30-knot winds on the north side, 25 to 35-knot winds from the south and east on the Pacific side. For the Aleutians, much stronger winds here across the west from Kiska all the way out to Attu, 45-knot winds with a 22-foot sea. You can see the west and southwesterly winds on the south side of the front, and we're still dealing with a little bit more of a westerly wind north of Adak and Atka for now. As we get into Friday, you can see the low pressure system working through and changing the winds up as we go, an east and southeasterly flow in the eastern parts of the chain and a stronger northerly flow in the west with 20 to 35-knot winds and 10 to 15-foot seas there. Looking at the west coast, a north and easterly wind over the ice, 25 to 35 knots. Some of the stronger winds moving over the Pribilofs with a 40-knot wind, 15-foot seas expected there. That diminishes somewhat on Friday, winds down to 35 knots. Same goes for Kuskokwim Bay over the ice and 40-knot winds over the St. Matthew Island waters. In sea ice-free areas, seas around 11 feet. And variable and light winds across the Arctic coast for Thursday. Northerlies continue from Cape Lisburne southward into the Kotzebue Sound region. Winds become variable and light there as well as we get into Friday. Look at the offshore flow there from the south and west, still holding around 10 knots by the end of the week. Here's a recap of your weather. Blizzard warning is in effect now until 4 o'clock tomorrow for the Pribilofs, looking for some accumulating snow and poor visibility with gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Same goes for the western parts of the Aleutians under a winter weather advisory as low pressure advances northward, beginning a changeover to some warmer weather across the west coast as we head toward the weekend. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.